Welcome to the Straight Red Card, and we want to welcome to the show Screaming Eagles President Paul Sotoudeh. Paul, thanks for stopping by to talk to us about DC United.
What's up, guys? That's quite an introduction. I'll try to live up to it.
Well, I wanted to do it more sort of boxing style, but it didn't come out that way.
Michael Butler over here, huh?
Yeah,
I need worth that. I'm 5'7", 100 and nothing. So that was.
We just wanted to make sure we got your name right because that can be a tongue twister for some people. But
absolutely, for every person that's not a Ryan.
But we're looking towards this oncoming season. You guys had a couple rough seasons coming up to this one, but I would say
understand.
Yeah.
After last season, yes.
Yeah. But I would
last season, Bad News Bears. Yeah, I did.
But I'm looking at what you guys have coming up this season. Let's talk about some of the major signings that happened this season and how eager you guys are to kind of kick this one off.
Well, I think there's a lot of excitement. It obviously starts in terms of new players. It starts with Charlie Davies in terms of the fan excitement.
Yep.
Everybody knows him and his story and knows what he's capable of if he's 100%. We don't know what 100% is for him yet, but I think everybody's certainly excited to see him. Mm-hmm. For me, I actually think that the most important new signing is Dax McCarty.
Yes.
I
agree.
really think that was a coup, and that's a guy that, people who haven't seen him play, I really feel like, the DC fan base, people only watch DC or only watch the Eastern Conference. This is a guy that's a really impressive central player. He'll defend for you. He'll attack for you. He'll make some passes. He'll make some runs. He'll score some goals. He'll tackle. Does a little bit of everything. I actually compare him, for people who are around, to a non-lunatic Dima Kovalenko. Because people focus with Dima. People focused on the lunacy for good reason, but Dima was a really good player in his prime, and he did a lot of very smart things on the field. And Dax reminds me a little bit of that, without the crazy bone crunching tackles. So those are the two guys, and Perry Kitchen's coming in, and nobody's really seen him, and as well as Rodrigo Brasechko, and it looks like the team has fallen in love with Kitchen, and seems to like Brasechko a lot, and so we may be seeing them starting. Jakovic will be in the mix. Some of us, including me, are familiar with Ethan White because he played at Maryland, and I know he's being projected as a project, but having seen him play, I really think he's extremely talented, and I'm really excited to see him develop as well. So it starts in central defense, and those guys are, I think, the most important guys. This team has been speed deficient forever, and Guenya is going to add that. Although how many minutes he's going to play, I think, is going to depend on whether Ben is playing a 4-4-2 or a 3-5-2 or a 3-6-1 or a 4-5-1. Yeah. Whether you got one or two forwards, I think if there's one forward, there's going to be a real battle for playing time. If Davies is healthy, he's going to get most of those minutes.
Yep.
Josh Wolff, same thing. Obviously, he's not the player he was pre-800 injuries and when he was younger, but that's a guy that is a professional. And just 2 years ago, he scored 10, 11 goals. Had a really good season in KC. And I think that's a guy that anybody who's followed American soccer for any period of time, you really got to respect him.
Yeah.
So that all those players, I think it's going to create a mentality that we're going to be a tough out. I don't know if we're going to set the world on fire, or at least MLS on fire, but we're going to be a really tough out this year because of those additions.
A couple things on what you mentioned. I can't speak for Derek, but I have to agree with your biggest player signing so far has been Dax McCarty. Biggest pickup, I think he's going to solidify your midfield. A couple things. I'm curious at who's going to probably play paired up with McCarty in the middle.
Yeah.
Are we going to see Perry Kitchen as a defensive midfielder, or are we going to see him as a center back like we've seen him with the U20s? Then the final thing is one thing you left off is I think one of your biggest signings that's going to be questionable as far as whether or not it works out well is Ben Olsen being your manager. I mean, he came on out of nowhere, and not out of nowhere. I mean, hell, he's been with DC for how long now? But he's
since 1998.
Yeah. So he has a history with the team, but how well he's going to do as a manager, if he can, if you can follow Price's role as far as players turn to managers, that'd be great for you guys. But that's probably my biggest question as far as the season goes along.
Yeah, I think here I have a few sort of thoughts on that. The first thing with McCarty, it's going to depend on whether we're playing a 4- or 5-man midfield. I expect McCarty to be paired with somebody, probably Clyde Simms, and realistically, like I think Clyde is more comfortable when he has a partner. When he was, and I think I see him as a more effective player in a 5-man midfield or in like a bucket with 2 guys back.
Right.
If he chooses to go with the traditional diamond, then I think, McCarty's going to be maybe back there by himself, or there may be a different role for him than just playing in the hole like that. Kitchen all indications are he's going to be a center back. I think that right now the team has a couple of guys that can play. I mean, you got McCarty, Simms, and Morsink, all of whom can play in that sort of defensive midfield, central defensive midfield role. I don't know that. I think the team feels fairly comfortable with those guys. I think realistically, if we're playing Morsink big minutes again, like we did last year, we're in deep trouble. That means we probably had some injuries to some guys. But I would expect that you're going to see 2 D mids, and it's going to be McCarty and Simms together. Kitchen will be in the back with either Brzesko or Jakovic, and we'll see kind of how that turns out. And Ben, I think everybody thinks that Ben is going to eventually be a great manager. Whether that's going to be the case right now is another question. And I think there's definitely some fear in the fan base that, the team kind of couldn't sign anybody else and brought him in. And when because they said so much last year, he's not going to be the permanent manager. He's not going to be the permanent manager. He's taking one for the team right now because the team is so bad, but he's not going to be the permanent manager. He's not ready. And then they made him the permanent manager. So I think there's some concern there. That said, this is probably the first off season in 3 or 4 where the signings that the team has made has, for the most part, the fan base happy. And I think a lot of people feel that that's Ben's influence. So people feel like he seems to be having more of a hand in player signings, whether that's fair or not, because the players that are being brought in are there's a common element, and they're battlers. And obviously Ben was one of those guys. And so I think the hope comes out of that he's at least recognizing talent.
If you guys do end up playing 5 in the middle, and obviously maybe that means Najar starts out wide, and then does that make because if you're playing 5 in the middle, Davies then would potentially be sort of your top point striker. Is that really kind of a natural position for him? I was thinking maybe you guys would play something like a 4-4-2 or some sort of form of 4-4-2 where you would have Simms and McCarty playing sort of one more defensive, one more free to roam. That would be McCarty, and then maybe play 2. Yeah, maybe playing 2 strikers up top, because Davies seems to be kind of the kid that needs sort of maybe a Wolff or somebody playing next to him up top.
Right. I tend to agree with that. I think that's, if I'm the manager, you put Najar and Boskovic maybe, or Karanta. If I don't think Karanta had a particularly good year last year, but it's almost impossible to assess anybody based on any individual player anyway, based on last year's team, because last year's team was so bad. But you could see sort of that kind of thing where McCarty could roam around, and you kind of have like the empty bucket where you got Najar on one side, Boskovic on the other, and then you play, I'd say Davies with Pontius, for example. I think
that's a good one, yeah.
You have a skill player like Pontius, who's sort of a classic kind of withdrawn forward, highly technical, good passer, can finish a little bit, with a speed guy who knows for the goal. Kind of more traditional poacher. Yeah. That makes sense to me. But I'm not in camp with the guys. I don't know I'm sure Chris was hurt a lot last year. I'm sure Chris is ready to play again. But there's some options there. Karanta being one of them. And I don't know if they brought back Fred. I'm not as excited as others about that return. I'll say this: like his first season here was very good, and he's a guy who can make a difference on a team if you're using him in a sub role. I think he's certainly got a nice skill set. Very gifted on the ball. If we're again, much like with Kurt Morsing, if we're playing him big minutes and counting on him to contribute like he did in 2007 when he had like the 7 goals and 8 assists, I think we're going to be unhappy.
Yeah.
It's funny that you bring that up about Fred, because actually me and Derek were talking about this before we even started these interviews, is that you're bringing back a player who had a really good first season, not a great second season, then not a great season with Philly, and then are we to expect his first season to resurge? I mean, I know Ben's had experience with Fred, and he will know him as a player and know what he can bring to the team, but it's just off current play.
Yeah, he was never counted on here. When he had his great year, I think was Gomez's last year, the first Gomez, the good Gomez.
Right.
And it's funny, you guys laugh at that, but that's like kind of what we call it.
Gomez Part 2?
Yeah, because we have that history. We had good Raul Diaz-Arce and bad Raul Diaz-Arce.
Yeah.
The only one that had a good second act with us was Jaime.
Yeah.
So, that's just it's funny that you guys laugh, because that's just how it's described around here. And so Fred was never when he was brought in, he was kind of advertised as he's going to be a central attacking midfielder in the Echeverry mold. He was never asked to do that. He was being played out a lot on the left, and he was able to play off these other guys, and he did very well. Like I said, I think you can certainly make the argument that as a bench player, maybe your first sub off when you're down a goal, or even when you're up a goal, to hold the ball. That's a guy he can give you something. But I wouldn't expect an 2007 season out of him this year, because if he's not going to get those kinds of minutes, and if he is getting those kinds of minutes, he's going to wear down. That's just his history. He's a nice player to have, but he's not so great that you can count on him.